Hello, welcome back to Creative Makings. My name's Claire. Today I want to talk you through a few heat embossing techniques. I don't know if you saw my last video where I made this card with the gnome and the pixie powder background. I shall put a link on if you didn't. But basically the background of my card today is the background that I used or that I created for on the last video. It's now since dried and it's a shame to not use it, so I should be making the most of it today. I want to show you a few heat embossing techniques. It could be that you're just starting out and you don't quite know what things to buy and you fancy you go at heat embossing but not quite sure which of the array of colours to go for out there. Well, I can show you a way that you can make the most of just using clear embossing powder. So if you just want to get started, all you need to do is get yourself a heat gun. You need to get some slow drying ink that stays wet, or this Ranger Perfect Medium, which is, it looks like an ink pad and essentially you use it like an ink pad, but it's like a wet sticky glue, as it were, that actually hold on to the embossing powder. And then I should be using clear embossing powder, because what that does, it creates a watermark. So you can stamp and emboss onto any coloured card and basically you'll get a darker shade of the card that you're embossing onto. So it takes away the need to have lots and lots and lots of different colours, although they are good and they're fun to play with when you're first starting out and you're not quite sure what to get hold of. This is a good compromise for you. I use clear embossing powder all the time. Right, so we're going to take some of the teal card and we're just going to create this stamped background as a banner to go in the back of the card there. Now again, it would be very hard to go and find an embossing powder that would tone in perfectly well with the cardstock like this. But all we need to do is take the stamp, or a stamp, whichever stamp you'd like, and this works with any stamp that you may have in your stash. I'm using the John Lockwood Christmas Borders and Flourishes. I'm taking the reindeer stamp there, which I've used quite a lot already this year. It's one of my favourites for Christmas. And I'm just going to ink that up. Again, use it just the same as you would do a normal ink pad. Just light tapping to make sure the whole of the stamp is coated. And then we stamp onto our cardstock. Give it a firm press, not too hard because it can sometimes make the stamp jump or you can get a slightly blurred image. But you can see there that already you have like a watermark effect going on. You can let that ink dry and it will stay that nice subtle toned image for you in the background. So that's another way to use these embossing pads. It won't dry to a completely clear ink, it will just leave a nice subtle detail. Now I'm just stamping that twice because that wasn't quite long enough to go across the whole strip for me. So onto a piece of copy paper, I'm going to put my clear embossing powder. Now I store my clear embossing powder because I use it all the time in a tub like this. So we just sprinkle that on. And we tap away the excess. So we can see there now that the image is in the white powder. Now you take your heating tool And we just keep the heating tool, I'd say a good 4 to 5 inches away from the image, and we just leave it in one place until you start seeing that embossing powder melt, and there you go, you can see it change colour. And you just move along slowly, embossing the images as you go. Now I'm just going to turn that round because these heat guns do get hot. I don't want to get my fingers. So there we are, we see how the image go. Don't overheat the image because that can distort the image, especially if you've got a fine detail on your stamp. And you can see there, and hopefully you can see that that just gives a nice sheen to the background. And tones beautifully with the teal cardstock there. So that gives a lovely impression. And I'm going to fix that. That'll be in place there. Now to add the detail onto the card, again I'm going to stamp and emboss, and I'll be using another of John Lockwood stamps actually from his, what's it called, the 12 Days of Christmas collection. The nice square images. I should be using this one, the 12 Days of Christmas. And I've already mounted that onto my acrylic block. This time I'm going to be putting it onto a piece of pearlized cardstock. But what I've done there, this is actually toned and coloured using the metallic gilding polish. So I've taken a piece of white cardstock and I've taken some of the powder blue gilding polish, taken the applicator from the top, put my finger in it, and I'll just keep my fingers up. Okay, I've taken the applicator, I've treated the applicator in with hot, soapy water, just warm soapy water, just for washing up liquid in the kitchen. You squeeze out the excess water and then you can go straight onto cardstock, and you can see there it's gives a lovely pearlised sheen. So again, if you're never quite sure what coloured pearl cardstock to go out and buy, or you only need one sheet of each, you buy colouring it yourself with the gilding polish. And if you get the gilding polish in your favourite colours, you know you've always got the pearlised cardstock there in the background. So there you can see it's a nice shimmery finish. Now I've already done that, and I've allowed the gilding polish to dry because I want to stamp on top of this. Now I'm using a stamp with very fine detail, so I'm going to make sure that after I've stamped the image and put the embossing powder on, I don't have any stray embossing powder sticking to parts of the image where I've perhaps got a fingerprint or something in there, because the embossing powder will stick to anything that's on the front of this card. But if you just use an anti-static pad, I've got a homemade one here, it's just a piece of muslin cloth with talcum powder in it. So if you just wipe it over the top, it takes away any greasy finger marks or any residue that may be on the top of the card. Now this time I'm going to ink the stamp with a black ink, a versafine black ink. And quite quickly after I've stamped the image, I'm going to tip on some of the Cosmic Shimmer embossing powder. This one is a pearl lapis luster, so it should give a lovely sheen, and depending on when you tilt it into the light, it gives you like a two-tone effect, so it'd be a nice interesting effect. And it also just tones down slightly the blackness of the ink, which is great because you want the image to pop, but sometimes the black can just be a little bit flat. So I'm going to stamp the image. Give it a nice even pressure all over. And straight away I'm going to put the embossing powder over the top. Right. Okay, we can just knock away the excess. And we can see there that all the ink has just taken hold of the embossing powder there. So we just give it a gentle tap on the back, just take away the excess. Always remove the excess embossing powder before you put your heat gun on, because it will blow it all over the place. Just holding that with tweezers again. Now this time you can see that I'm just heating the image from behind. It really doesn't matter. Sometimes, depending on the detail you have on the stamp, if it's a finer detail like this one, if you emboss on the reverse of the image, it just keeps the detail slightly more crisp. But it is it's up to you. It's your choice. Now I don't know if you can see, and you can see the sheen on there already, but there is a slightly gold hue to that embossing, and the harshness of the black has just taken off. Actually, it's made the black ink turn into like how can I say it, like a platinum sort of colour. So it's a really lovely effect. So I can start putting this card together now. We just glue the border across the top there. I didn't want to do too much to this card. We wanted to keep the beautiful look of the pixie powders in the background there. And we glue that to there. Using that pearl luster embossing powder that I used on this image here, it can turn whichever inks you're using to emboss with into another colour altogether. So it's actually another good bet, along with clear embossing powder. Go with a pearl luster embossing powder also, and you can get a whole host of different effects without having too many different embossing powders. Now I'm just going to finish off by putting a simple greeting at the bottom of there. So I'm going to be using the Holly Jolly Christmas stamps again. And I think I'll use Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year image. But we just put this onto the acrylic block. And this time I'm just going to stamp this in straightforward black ink. And I'm going to put that direct. Actually, I'll put that over there, I think. I'm just going to go direct to the card. Some firm pressure. There we are. Nice and simple but elegant Christmas card. And because I've used the same colour tones, it can be part of a matching set. with the gnome card I made last week. Thanks so much for watching again. I hope to see you again soon.